Now, if you ever find yourself in the midst of painful events or experiences, or you have a brother navigating painful events or experiences, I want you to remember to talk. This becomes a very important framework for you in stressful times. And if you notice in your video notes, there's a chart with the following acronym: TALK. T-A-L-K. And this acronym is something I teach men when they're feeling the pressure of life build and build and build and build. So let's work through this framework, T-A-L-K. First of all, T, tell someone about it. Don't suffer in silence. You got to speak up. Give your needs a voice. T, tell someone about it. A, accept, assess, and admit your limits. Give all of your internal needs a voice. L, look within and attune to what you feel. Recognize the internal impact of your trauma or distress. It's okay to admit that you're a little broken. K, know the signs and symptoms of overwhelm. Pay attention to all the gauges on your internal dashboard. You see, every person has an internal dashboard representing the quality of their physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, and relational health. And all of these areas has kind of a gauge on the inside of us, indicating whether it's in a state of deficit or strength. And if at a certain moment the pressure or deficit is high, then there will be a warning signal going off inside of you. And it's important, especially as men, to pay better attention to all of these internal signals. As an example, just consider with me the area of a person's physical health. One signal that may sound internally, if their physical health is in a state of deficit, is an increased heart rate or blood pressure. Both signals indicate that something internally is creating pressure in our blood, which pushes the heart to work overtime. And without paying attention to indicators like this in our bodies, a person may unintentionally cultivate a lifestyle that makes them more susceptible to heart or cardiac problems. Now, in the same way, if a person has layers and layers of repressed disappointment, of frustration, and layers upon layers of repressed relational pain, all of these factors will make them more susceptible to an emotional breakdown in the future. And as I've mentioned, a breakdown, if it occurs, doesn't always come in the form of like homelessness or admission into a medical facility, the things that we traditionally associate with a breakdown. More often, our breakdowns are seen and felt in a silent collapse of hope. In other words, our hearts, emotionally or spiritually, fails. At a certain point in our lives, we turn on emotional autopilot and we stop attempting to reconcile or resolve life's difficulties. We stop trying to improve ourselves or relationships. We simply drift and passively accept wherever life takes us. Sometimes we as men, we hide ourselves in our work. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we conceal the true condition of our soul. You see, emotional autopilot creates all the right conditions for a collapse of hope. And when we're on like this emotional autopilot, we're just showing up, clocking in, clocking out in life, we're only a few baby steps away from just complete burnout. But the TALK acronym, as we've discussed, it's written in a way to stop, in many cases, reverse a person's sense of emotional autopilot. You see, when we as men begin again to work on ourselves and the state of our relationships and overcome the temptation just to stay the same, we slowly work our way out of our internal deficit and begin to make our way back to strength. Like a gentle wind of assurance, hope begins to blow in our souls. But first, we must talk. Please, men, you must talk. Let us not push the people closest to us, the people who are willing to listen, behind some shield of silence. Let us not leave them to endure the consequences of our silent eruptions, even if it's difficult, even if it's painful, even if it's a bit risky. We, if at all possible, must talk. If we as men desire to overcome the forces that press down upon us, we must get better at talking about the hard stuff. We must be willing to tell another human being the exact nature of our distress. We must have the courage to send a text or to pick up the phone and call someone. Sometimes we must show up to counseling sessions or agree to sit down with a pastor or a trusted friend. We must give the feelings that have been repressed deep down inside of us a voice, and we must free them from their cages and chains in our hearts. Often I tell people that showing up to the first counseling session is often the hardest, because showing up to the first session means that you have finally admitted to yourself that you need help. And this, men, takes courage and it takes guts.